Hello and welcome, I'm Mystical, this is Mystical Gaming and welcome back. We are back on Watcher of Realms and we are looking at GR1 today. And we're going to push on to stage 18. The important thing with stage 18 to bear in mind is that it's the first place that drops mythic only gear. So we won't get any of the legendary stuff, it'll all be mythic and possibly ancient as well. So that's where we want to push on to. Champions we're going to be using, we are going to be using Dolores and we have got Awakened to Awaken 5. Don't think you really need it, however it is useful because it extends the duration of her ultimate. Now her ultimate applies 40% inspiration to other allies in range for 22 seconds. Now the inspiration buff increases attack proportional to the caster's attack. While this effect is active, other buffs affecting the inspiration will not take effect. Additionally, the caster is immune to such buffs. Now I assume that's to mean that you can't double stack putting inspiration on her and then making her cast do inspiration, but I think I'll have a play around and I check with that tomorrow. Now the other champion we're using is Autumn. Now we're using her for her buffs. She has two that she applies. The first one is a crit rate buff. Now I haven't got this fully booked up, you can get another 5% on it, but it just increases the crit rate for your champions. Now with my gear and my champions being relatively low level, I could do with the crit rate. Now this is triggered, as it says here, when using Gold Maple's Boon. She then uses her ultimate, which is the crit damage increase buff. So she then put on the crit rate, crit damage buff to your champions within range. Let's look at Gear Raid 1 and look through the monster manual. The first thing to notice here is the Crimson Ooze, the Stitched Carrion, the Scythe of Doom and the Incubator all have defense and magic resistance which are the same, so it doesn't matter which damage you do to them. However, the Fallen Templar, Knight of Destruction and the Skeletal Knight shields have a very high defense and a very low resistance to magic, so you're better off using your AoE magic DPS rather than your marksman DPS here. Okay, so I'm using Morrigan and Setram. Setram, yes, I know it is a marksman, however they're the only two that I have both booked up to level 60, so they're both getting used. For Mage DPS, I'm going to be using Kriya and Greed. They're only both at 50, but I just want as much DPS down as I can and AoE, and that's all I've got, so we'll be using them. Additionally, I've got Vortex up, but he is up at 50 as well, and he is just there to keep the DPS alive so I can keep that sustained DPS on the mobs as they try and break through the wall. Okay, let's get into the run. First one down is Morrigan. She's down in the top tile and she is facing up to cover off the first wall. She is there as our main AoE DPS. Next to her goes Greed, again keeping the magic DPS going, again AoE. Now after this we want Setram. He gets placed down behind them. He's got a nice long range and he can cover off. In between them is Dolores. She keeps all three of those within the inspiration range for when we trigger her ultimate. Now we just keep the DPS going there whilst we set up the next set of 6 tiles across the other side of the map. First is Kriya. She's going down to face towards Morrigan, again covering off that first wall, and we've got Autumn placed in beside her. Now as we trigger Dolores' ultimate, we can see the inspiration buff has gone on to our champions. If we zoom in, we can get the look to see that they've got the icon above their heads. However, when we select the champion, there is no buff attached to them, unlike when we trigger Autumn. Next, we're back to the first set of 6 tiles. We want Vortex down to keep our main DPS alive. Now as you can see, we are 21 out of the 73 mobs dead before the boss has arrived. I like to keep a check on these sort of things just in case I have to rerun it, and then I can see if I'm doing better or worse as the game goes on. So if we trigger Autumn's ultimate, we can now see if we check the champions, they've both got the crit rate and the crit damage buff attached to them. These are slightly different, as Dolores is an ability, whereas Autumn does actually buff the champions. The first wall is down as we hit 37 out of the 73 dead. Now Autumn dies at 52 out of the 733 mobs dead. She is replaced with Voltaz, is just to keep some form of sustained DPS going on the mobs. It isn't for anything more than that. Now we've only now got the boss left, and we've only just got a little over 50% of the wall left as well. Now as you can see, final part of the boss and the final part of the wall, it is a bit of a close call, but when we look at the gear, there is a lot of wriggle room there. I could actually up the gear to get some more DPS or more healing out of Autumn, so she could have triggered her ultimate a few more times. So I think there was a lot of wriggle room in this run that I could have done to actually sustain it. Now, when we have a look, when this is done, we have a look at stage 19. The BP requirement is 614, which is quite the jump from 473, and we've only got just under 300,000 anyway, so we're a long way off going for level 19. Now what I like to do afterwards is just have a quick run back on auto while everything's still fresh in my head to make sure the auto run runs perfectly fine. Now there shouldn't be any issues with this because you've got your Paragon bonus, so it should work a lot better. And as you can see, they're not even getting close to getting the first wall down this time, and that's gone through with no worries whatsoever. So we're happy now that we can leave it on auto and just let it run and collect our rewards for us. So here are the champions and the gear that was used. There's Morrigan. Again, she's got nothing above level 12, and I've mostly just gone for attack percentage on it because the gear I've got isn't good. Setran, basically the same. He's just mostly stacking full legendary stuff. Again, it's all attack bonus because that's all I've got, but they are both my 60s, and that's probably my best gear. From there on in, it starts going downhill. Kriya, again, she's got mostly legendary. She's got the one mythical piece, but nothing is rolled up past level 12. Greed, the same with him. I have tried where I can with these champions to add crit rate if I've got it, but essentially the gear isn't good enough to actually get that stamped on the champions anyway, so that's a miss. And now Vortax, an interesting one. I haven't gone the attack percentage with him because when you have a look at his skills, his healing is based off HP percent. So his gear is HP percent, not attack percent. Just a quick reminder for you there. Now, when we come on down to the other champions, the thing to bear in mind is I'm now mostly out of gear, and I think I could have pushed on a bit further if I'd geared these champions. So here's Dolores again. Not everything here is even up to level 12. We're starting to hit level 8. Again, this is just the level of my gear. I probably could have, if I looked around, got some better gear on her, but it's just good enough to do the job, and we just want to get it done. So as we increase the gear level on her, it will become easier, and it's on full auto farm anyway. Autumn, that goes downhill even more. Now you see we've got even +4 gear on her and some blue items. And then her skills aren't all done either, and she's not awakened. So there's a lot of improvement I could have done there just to keep her healing up, and she could have triggered her ultimate a few more times. And then lastly, we used Voltes, and his gear is pretty atrocious. So there you go, there's some rare pieces on him, and then some epics, and the best he's got is a level 12 legendary piece of kit. One of the things to bear in mind is the placement of your champions when you do Gear Raid 1, and also as much magical damage, AoE, DPS as you can get going, and that will, I think, get you through it. Like I said, Morrigan out DPS'd everyone by quite some margin, but that's no surprise. If you got this far in the video, thank you very much for watching. If you could leave me a thumbs up, that'd be nice, and if you could subscribe, that'd be even better. Tomorrow I think I'm going to have a look at Dolores, and I'm going to have a look at Autumn to see how they interact with each other and what it means with the difference with regards to a buff, and with it being Dolores' ability. Can one trigger the other? Who knows? We'll see if we can find out. Thank you very much for your time. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a nice night.